Immigration law in the United States has been built upon the following principles: reunification of families, admitting immigrants with skills that are valuable to the U.S. economy, protecting refugees, and promoting diversity. Coming from India, a nation with a population density 4 times larger than America's, and being a place where everyone owned a small business and everyone worked hard, my uncle, Vip Mengle, migrated to America with his family in 1989. Vip was born on September 8, 1981, in New Delhi, India. His dad, Suresh Chand Mengle, was born one of 7 boys on either September or March 16, 1952. It's impossible to know the exact date, as there were no birth records recorded in his hometown of Nabdai during that time. Nabdai was made up of several small businesses and around 1,000 people, 90% of which were poor. Vip's dad wanted a wife, so he traveled to the Bansal family in Delhi and met Raj. Raj was born in Delhi on July 5, 1955. Together, they settled down in New Delhi, where Suresh worked as an accountant and Raj worked as a librarian. On December 4, 1979, Anshul Mengle was born. 2 years later, Vip was born. Growing up in India, the Mengle family lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with their grandmother. There was no middle class in India, but they weren't poor. Quote, "But well off there is a 2-bedroom apartment here," end quote. Politically, India during the late 1980s and early 1990s was a communist country. Communism had begun in India on December 25, 1925, but it didn't have much effect on Vip's childhood or daily life. Quote, "I was too young to remember any of the politics of it," end quote. During this time, there were several semi-forced migrations occurring from Southeast Asia, Cuba, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Quote, "From April to September of 1980, approximately 124,000 Cuban refugees arrived in Florida via boat." For the Mengles, Suresh was on the list for a green card for 10 years when he finally received his green card and ability to come to America. Suresh and Raj took a plane to Indiana to look at the housing options. They bought a small apartment in Indianapolis, then a month later, Raj flew back and got Vip and Anshul. Quote, "We moved to Indianapolis as my mom's older brother sponsored us for a green card," end quote. Both Suresh and Raj were able to receive their green cards and years later their citizenship. Vip and Anshul received their citizenship in college after taking a test and meeting the immigration standards of that time. Vip doesn't remember much of when they first got here, but their, quote, "apartment and neighborhood," end quote. Quote, "It's understood in India that if you come here, it's easier to become successful. Over there, you're competing against a lot more people, whereas over here, you're competing against a lot less people," end quote. Vip's parents were on the list for a green card for 10 years, wanting to find a place with more opportunities. In a broad overview of other migrants from that time, there was a cap on how many people could travel into America with a visa and live here. Quote, "According to the American Immigration Council, the United States immigration system says, to apply for U.S. citizenship, an individual must have a lawful permanent residence, which means to hold a green card, for at least 5 years. This could shift to 3 years if he or she obtained the green card through a U.S. citizen, spouse, or through the Violence Against Women Act. To apply for citizenship, one must be at least 18 years old, demonstrate continuous residency, demonstrate, quote, good moral character, end quote, pass English and history and civics exams with certain expectations, and pay an application fee, among other things," end quote. A year after immigrating to America, there was a change in the immigration laws of that time. This involved the Immigration Act of 1990. The Immigration Act of 1990, quote, "negated the immigration caps based on hemisphere and instituted a total number cap of 675,000 persons, with 480,000 spots designated for family members of United States citizens, 140,000 spots designated for employment-based immigrants, and 55,000 spots for, quote, diversity, end quote, immigrants," end quote. Entering America was good, but starting school was really hard. Vip's new school wanted to put him into the 2nd grade, but his mom, Raj, pleaded with the school to allow him to take a placement test, where he tested into the 3rd grade with really high math scores. Quote, "School in the beginning was really hard. I didn't know English that well or at all. There's so much slang in English. It was hard for us to learn. It was relearning the language, and everyone around us was speaking slang. I remember getting made fun of a lot, as I didn't know what "you're grounded" meant or what Halloween was. My teacher asked me to draw a jack-o'-lantern, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what a pumpkin was at that time. End quote. During this time, Vip and Anshul were getting free meals at school. This was one of the hardest parts of the new culture shock, as both the boys were vegetarian, and a regular American school meal was not equipped to serve a vegetarian. Making friends wasn't a problem for Vip, but he would find himself occasionally getting into scruffs with other kids. Quote, "For the first year, we'd get into fights a lot because my parents weren't home. It was just the culture, though. It was unsupervised. You just go to the field over there and play. And if you got into a fight over basketball, you'd get into a fight over basketball." End quote. Biggest shock was that after learning English, school became easy. Quote, "I could always outwork the other kids in my class. I always got good grades. Math, even English got easy for me because I just worked on it." End quote. In India, everyone worked hard. Quote, "In America, we were poor, but I didn't realize we were poor. We moved around and didn't own a house until my mom got a job. My mom ended up becoming the bread maker because my dad was failing at his businesses." End quote. India was a very sexist place where the husband was commonly the one making the money. This caused stress on their marriage as the gender roles were reversed. The upside of Raj getting a job was that this moved them to the middle class. While working as a nighttime custodian, Raj started to go to school to study computer science. She got an American computer science degree, which earned her her first good-paying job at Eli Lilly, which at the same time was the biggest pharmaceutical employer in Indianapolis. In India, quote, "The dream there is to have a successful business," end quote. Suresh was an accountant back in India, but in America, he couldn't successfully start a CPA company as he failed the CPA exam 4 to 5 times trying. Later on, Raj and Suresh bought a Subway sandwich shop. They started to work there to make more margin. This was a big culture change for them as they were vegetarian and giving out meat sandwiches. Raj and Suresh bought 9 more Subways over the years and ran 10 all at once. This was the most you were allowed to own in Indianapolis. They recently sold their last one to retire. Vip went to public school until middle school. Quote, "My brother went to public high school, but I was getting good grades, so I got sent to Jesuit school. I was the only one from my public school to get in. I hated the fact I was going there at the time. The school was not diverse, but I got financial aid. Everyone there was white and well off, so I didn't like a lot of the kids because at the time we were still lower middle class. I had a preconceived notion that they were bad because they were rich, but I was wrong." End quote. Quote, "Everyone in India knows that doctors are rich here, so my parents wanted me to become an engineer or a doctor, as everyone knows you will be guaranteed financial success." End quote. He then Googled the #1 school of biomedical engineering, which happens to be Johns Hopkins. Quote, "I didn't visit until after I got in, and it was the only school I applied to. I had the idea of biomedical engineering, so I Googled the #1 school for that in the nation and chose it. I always wanted to compete." End quote. Vip graduated from Johns Hopkins in 2003. He wanted to intern for a company called Medtronic as an engineer, but got denied, so with his biomedical engineering degree, he went to med school. Before med school, Vip took a gap year where he researched at NIH in Bethesda, Maryland for a year, where he met his now wife, my Aunt Morgan. Vip attended medical school at Rush in Chicago. His residency was for anesthesiology. He chose this after Googling, quote, "top 3 doctors that made the most money," end quote. As he was doing this, he was on the side studying for a brokerage test, which he passed and started his own brokerage firm in Chicago. He did this as a side business while going through medical school. Around this time, he had my cousin Leighton. Vip then decided to subsection his doctorate and study pain management for a fellowship at UVA for 1 year. When he moved from Chicago to Virginia, he lost his real estate license, so he started moonlighting overnight shifts in a hospital an hour away in Culpeper, Virginia to make extra money. Around this time, he had my cousin Cameron. Vip later moved to Fairfax, Virginia, and him and Morgan had my cousin Sadie. The Mengels decided to settle down in Fairfax. Vip, since then, has bought and helped run an urgent care in Fairfax and a pharmacy in New Orleans. The family also have some rental beach houses they lease to other families down in the Outer Banks. It's the American dream to work for someone, but in India it is a dream to have a successful business. Since America is the land of opportunities, the Mengals definitely took full advantage of theirs and worked diligently for all of them.